The emotion, the responses from people in the room, heart-gripping and emotional as a conversation of race and the history of African Americans in this country, the lessons learned back then, and how to move forward now. A special edition of Michigan Chronicle, Pancakes and Politics, starts right now.
Good morning, and welcome to the final forum of the 23 season of the Michigan Chronicle, Pancakes and Politics. We hope you enjoyed this season. It has been a great season of thought-provoking discussion. Today will not disappoint. The topic is race, culture, and religion. We're doing things a little differently today, as you can see from the stage. So at this time, I'd like to call to the podium Mr. Hiram E. Jackson, the CEO of Real Times Media, and our panelists.
Good morning, everybody. Hey, Chad. How you doing? Good. You can see today is a little different. We've been doing this for 18 years, and I don't think we've ever had a panel this big and this important. But we're going to move through the program quickly so we can have a lot of conversation here. But there were a few housekeeping issues. Today is the final Pancakes and Politics of the season at the DAC. So let me just say it's been wonderful. After, I think this is, like I said, our 18th year, people truly embrace this brand, this event, and I was telling someone earlier, Pancakes and Politics has a life of its own. I was talking to someone the other day out in Birmingham, and they were just talking about Pancakes and Politics, how she had never been, she wanted to go, and she didn't know I was the publisher of the Michigan Chronicle, right? And I said, I might be able to get you in the room, right? She was complaining about never being able to get a ticket, it's always sold out, and I said, I think I know some people over there, right? So I was pretty excited about that. Today's title is Race, Culture, Religion. We're going to get into the conversation a little bit later. But I want to thank the Michigan Chronicle staff. Please give them a round of applause. Especially Opal May, and who's our Vice President of Special Events, and Leonard Corbin, in particular those two, because they really keep the engine going and they make it look like I actually do some work, but they make good things happen. I want to thank the DAC staff. The DAC has been hosting these for 18 years. Please help me give them a round of applause. And like I always say, you cannot do something of this substance, of this magnitude, this impactful, without great partners. And we look at our sponsors. Of course, they write the check for us to be in here, but they're bigger than that. They help us shape the event. They help us shape the discussion, and most of our sponsors have been with us all 18 years. I'd like to thank our key sponsors, the Platinum Partners, Walker Miller Energy Group, Signal Restoration, DTE Energy, Delta Dental, our broadcast partner, General Motors, and our Overdrive partner, Business Leaders for Michigan. Please give them a round of applause. Absolutely would not be able to do something of this level without their support and their input, and more importantly, their friendship. Okay. Is Dennis here yet? Dennis is like Reverend Anthony. He just show up when they want to. They just, program just start when they walk in, you know. Just let me be in charge one time. I want to bring up to the stage Michael Bickers, who's the president of Detroit and Southeastern Michigan for PNC Bank. They are our presenting partner, and they do a great job at being a great partner and friend. Michael, please join us.
I like this side better. I don't know why. So I get 3 minutes per session, I'm told. So that's 12, because there's 4. I've taken 3. 9 minus 3, 12 minus 6. So I get 9 minutes this time. And I might take them all. I feel compelled to do that. I've never done a PNC commercial up here in these because I want to make certain that you guys are always connected to me and my team locally and not just have you read about what PNC is doing nationally and how it impacts you. So thanks to Hiram and Dennis and the staff, and what a great season we've had, if you could give it up for them. You know, June is special because it's also about Juneteenth. And when half the world is trying to eliminate Black history from our memory, that makes it very important to all of us here in Southeast Michigan. And so you will see a lot of great companies and leaders do a lot of posts around those events and activities from some outstanding companies and organizations and people. But at PNC, we celebrate Juneteenth and Black History Month every single day, don't we, PNC? So I'll take just a few minutes to give you what that looks like for us. A few weeks ago, me, my team, and a bunch of volunteers hosted almost 600 pre-K kids at the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. Yes, we did. We posted that. And the little kids showed up, and we took them in cycles, and some, I think, James, they were doing percussion stuff upstairs, and one group with their parents and chaperones, they got treated to a wonderful violin concert with 4 young people. It was outstanding as they walked through a book. A lady walked up to me, and she looked like she was about to cry. And she said, I said, "Are you okay?" She says, "Well, Mr. Bickers, it's just that I live several blocks away, and I've never been inside this place because I didn't think it was for us." And I said, "Well, today it is. Today it is." That's the kind of work that we do. Tonight, I'll go over to Marygrove with a bunch of my teammates to celebrate Juneteenth as a formal event. You all are invited. My team's going to kill me now. Barbecue, cabbage, poems, dance, everything at Marygrove campus, where we've recreated that educational institution to the likes no one has ever seen. On June 12th, I'll sit down with Dr. Ken Harris from the Black Chamber to talk about the state of Black and brown business on the campus of Wayne State University with a bunch of my closest friends. On September 20th, what we will do, I think September 20th, is invite close to 200 of my closest nonprofit partners to have a discussion about the state of economic development in our city and surrounding communities. But I do not like to say those things in a comfortable setting where you can't hold us accountable to that. That's easy to do. It's like forming D&I committees. Gina and her team, they do that work, but the hard work is actually putting your money where your mouth is. So what we will do is share with them a scorecard around our performance around the $88 billion community development plan that we submitted some years ago. How we're doing with mortgages in the city, how we're doing with business banking in the city to minority-owned businesses, how we're still supporting our kids. We will show them where we are, and not all of it is on track. That's my job. I guess what I'm telling you is this: no matter what panel you see, no matter what economic conference you go to, no matter how many committees tell you about all the reasons why DEI, all of that is important, you make certain to hold them to the highest standard. You make certain to hold them to the PNC standard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Clean energy technology is becoming increasingly important as the world seeks to transition to more sustainable sources. There are enormous economic opportunities in the industry and a chance for Detroit to be the innovation hub.
We change lives through clean energy. And we do that by inviting people who have historically been not just underrepresented, but excluded from the clean energy industry. The segment is so large, and the transition of dollars, we're talking about trillions of dollars that are going to exchange hands in the next few years. So there's space for everyone. We have to nurture the space. We have to bring people in, and we have to make them feel safe. We have to make sure they have opportunities for growth. Now, Walker Miller's role in the clean energy industry and the growth of the clean energy industry is to make space, to box out space for Black people and brown people, and make sure we have any role we want.
By facilitating discussions and providing a platform for underrepresented groups to engage in these conversations, Pancakes and Politics is helping to promote diversity and inclusivity in not only the clean energy sector, but a multitude of burgeoning industries, leading to more innovative solutions and a more equitable, more just, and more sustainable future for all. Walker Miller Energy Services proudly supports these efforts.
Carla is, she's definitely brokenhearted. She couldn't be at this particular panel, but I'd rather be where she is, just relaxing. So thank you to Walker Miller Energy Services for that great video. I want to bring up our host and moderator, Dennis Archer Jr. Dennis is the chair and CEO of 1642 Ventures, and Dennis, I rib him a lot. He's done a phenomenal job. Please give him a round of applause. Come on up. Honestly, I saw Dennis doing a fireside chat with Dan Gilbert 5 or 6 years ago, and I thought it was the most authentic conversation I had seen as an interviewer. And just want to thank him for the level of quality that he brings to our program and the professionalism. And that's the last good thing you will ever hear me say about Dennis. All right, Dennis, your show, brother.
Are you gonna stay up here?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I feel like I'm, on probation or something with you standing up here. Good morning. Let me just say, for those of you who have attended this session over the number of years, you have seen the programming and the production quality increase year over year. So again, special shout out to your entire team, Hiram, for putting together a great show. I feel like I'm on the set of a CNN town hall meeting or something. Let me say this. This week for me has been about kids. Both my kids finishing school. I have one that graduated last night. And we went to the graduation, and the school that my son goes to happens to be the alma mater of Hiram and I. Extraordinarily diverse student body. People from all cultures and ethnicities. The graduation happened to be at a synagogue. They announced everyone's name, where they're going, MIT, Harvard, Yale, and of course, the University of Michigan. But all that for me was tempered when I looked down in the pew and I saw this. This says, Active Shooter Event Quick Reference Guide. So next to the Torah, Gary, was this laminated sheet explaining to run first, hide second, fight last. So this is what my children are growing up with. I come home and I turn on the news, and the king of beers is no longer the king of beers. Budweiser is no longer Bud Light, the top-selling beer in the country. Why? Because they featured a transgender influencer in an ad campaign, so people stopped buying their beers. And then back to the kids. 2 weeks ago, another esteemed school had a 9th grader, and actually a person of color, post on social media a post that says, let's go buy some AR-15s and go kill the Jews. He's a 9th grader. This is sad because that is what our kids are exposed to, and it's sad because it's becoming normal. Today's discussion on race, culture, and religion could not be more timely. But before we engage our guest on stage, we're going to watch a video.
In May of 2023, a group of Michigan business leaders met for a conversation about America's history with race, culture, and religion. Through open dialogue and engagement with different perspectives, they gained new insights, as well as a deeper understanding of themselves and the people around them. This transformative experience opened their minds to the generational impact of bias and racism, and the importance of working together towards a more equitable future.
They showed me some archival footage of that day. It showed me running into this cloud of tear gas. The sheriff's deputy running behind me, hitting me. It showed me falling down. It showed this Alabama state trooper kicking me so hard, I came up off the ground.
Even if you knew about what happened, it just brings it to life. What stands out for me the most is the strength in the eyes of the people who were marching. I know maybe they were scared, but they also were stronger than the guards that were beating them. To me, it still represented, the ultimate power that the human spirit has, because these people stood for something and they ultimately gave their life, so we are all able to have a better future.
When I come down here and see what's been going on, know the history for the last 50 years, I feel like we're going backwards.
Yeah.
Honestly, when it comes to voting rights, access to voting, reduction of voting locations, all of that kind of stuff. In Michigan, I think Michigan is much worse it's not worse than Georgia. You can't eat in line, drink water in line, and vote in Georgia. So I think that when we hear these things, we should all be alarmed, because it's just a matter of time before it comes to us.
There's so many things that show us that this is not our history. This is our present. And it might be less obvious, but the design is bright and clear. And so as individuals, we have to connect, but we all have such a responsibility to do more than connect. We have such platforms, and we have to be laser focused on the exquisite design of racism that shows up in Detroit every day.
So to me, again, it goes back to the role of business leaders as citizens and being responsible. Is when having, and I really believe that we all have to be civically responsible. And it's something we grapple with every day. When do you stand up, speak out on an issue? But I believe that we have to, and I think businesses have to, and they have to lead.
It's important that we keep the dream alive, but more important than the dream is the plan. See, so many people want to leave Dr. King on a mountaintop, dreaming rather than bringing him back down into the valley working. He was about work. He was more than a dreamer. He was a doer. He was a worker. He was an impactor. And that's what this is about.
We spent 2 wonderful days together with an outstanding and diverse group of leaders, with the goal of searching and creating opportunities to never forget our country's collective painful past, with an obligation on all of us to ensure that everyone's future in America is more equitable, more uplifting, and more just.
We must first confront the truths of history, even when they are painful, and use the knowledge gained as a catalyst for positive change. When we are brave and face our past, It inspires us to learn from past mistakes, shape our actions with wisdom, and strive for a more enlightened, equitable, and compassionate world.
Gary Torgo, who is not at all an unknown entity here in Detroit as it relates to supporting our community, took a group of leaders, many of whom are before you today, down south and leveraged a tour group called Living Legacy Pilgrimage, which is a leading civil rights experience group, to go on a 3-day tour. They went from Atlanta to Birmingham to Montgomery, many of the national gems as it relates to civil rights history. And what we will discuss today is the impact that that has had. Let me before I introduce our panelists. Jeff Donofrio is the president and CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan. He's been with us before. BLM is the state's business roundtable. Under Jeff's leadership, they have dedicated and are dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, education, and most importantly to me, widely shared prosperity. Father Tim McCabe is the executive director and president of the Pope Francis Center. Under his leadership, the center, which serves our city's homeless, welcomes nearly 200 guests a day, providing them with nutritious meals, showers, laundry, and access to doctors, dentists, lawyers, and housing providers. Kenneth Nixon is the Director of Community Outreach and Partnerships for Safe and Just Michigan. In his role, he works tirelessly to form networks between criminal justice reform advocates, legislators, community organizations, and businesses, all with the goal of creating a better justice system for the state of Michigan. Chad Newton, my CEO, runs the Wayne County Airport Authority, which is about a $400 million entity. Chad has won multiple awards for the airport from a consumer standpoint. And Chad is extraordinarily committed to equity and equality at the airport, particularly as it relates to supplier diversity. Jerry Norcia, we all know, is the CEO of DTE Energy. He's responsible for strategic oversight and operations of the electric and gas utility. He has been there for more than 30 years, and his experience spans executive leadership roles, business development, engineering, and operations. And with Jerry, again, like Gary, we are all, I think, very familiar with his commitment to the city of Detroit. Reverend Sharonice Jackson is the pastor of Vernon Chapel AME Church in Detroit. Under her leadership, Vernon Chapel is widely known as being community-centered and globally minded. Her passion is the development of young people and their families. Reverend Jackson is a published author and has been trained as a crisis intervention counselor. Reverend Wendell Anthony, who we now know, to get him here on time, have to put him on the stage. I couldn't help myself, Rev.
He's later than you.
Reverend Anthony serves as pastor of Fellowship Chapel and oversees numerous outreach ministry programs at the James E. Wadsworth Jr. Community Center, including health and wellness, youth mentoring, and development and job training. We also know that Rev is the president of the NAACP Detroit branch, the largest and most successful in the United States, which hosts a sit-down dinner, bringing nearly 10,000 leaders to celebrate and commemorate the struggles for social justice. Rev, what's the date on that?
June 25th.
June 25th. Are tickets still available?
They're running. So you can still get yours and be on time.
Yeah. Gary Torgo previously served as the executive chairman of TCF until TCF's merger with Huntington in June 2021, and served as executive chairman of Talmer Bank Corp. Until its merger with Chemical Financial Corporation in August of 2019. Before joining Talmer, Mr. Torgo founded and chaired the Sterling Group, a Michigan-based real estate development and investment company, which is still in good hands of his kids. Gary is now the chairman of Huntington Bank. Lastly, Angelique Power, who we heard from in the video with some very powerful words, is the president and CEO of the Skillman Foundation. which is a Detroit-based private independent foundation that puts all of its resources towards Detroit's youth, their justice, their power, and their promise. With assets over $550 million, this allows the foundation to provide approximately $22 million in gifts annually. A round of applause for our panel, please. Hiram.
Let me start the discussion by saying that I received a call from Gary Torgo asking me to join him on a trip down south. And that was the request. And like I always do, yes, Gary, absolutely. The last time I got a call like that from Gary and got on a plane with him, the President of the United States ended up asking me for my cell number, and 2 days later invited me to a meeting with him in California. So I feel like if Gary calls, I'm picking up the phone and I'm going. But from what I understand, all 23 of us immediately said yes, absolutely. And the reason that's significant is because usually people run away from conversations about race and culture and religion. And these people here today and a few others that joined us not only immediately agreed to join the trip, but participated enthusiastically. It was a very emotional experience over the 2 days. And let me say that, I hope that comes out here in the discussion, but more importantly, we're gonna use this trip to hopefully spark a deeper conversation, a community-wide conversation. The trip was important, deeply important, but we're using it as an opportunity for us to share with you, so hopefully you will go back to your respective organizations and create this type of energy. We're gonna go a little past 9 o'clock so that we can have a full discussion. Please enjoy it. Please, we have 2 gentlemen out here asking, I think they're out there.
One,
okay.
Andre
Ash is out here, and we'll give everybody an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. But thank you for coming, and I'll let Dennis take it from here.
Thank you, Hiram. Before we get into the Q&A, we're going to have a couple of opening remarks. The first from Gary Torgo. Gary?
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you, Hiram, and thank you, PNC, and thank you all for being here. This trip really emanated from a very important date in American history. It was May 25th, 2020. That was the day that George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. That murder sparked probably the greatest protest in the United States of America. Over 2,000 cities had protests. Over 200 cities announced curfews. It was a worldwide global protest. It came on the heels of the death of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Atlanta, Louisville, and so many other places. But that moment when George Floyd was murdered really, I think, changed the conversation across the world. It was a $20 crime that turned into one of the most tragic deaths in our country. And on that week, our bank, TCF, which had a really big presence in Minneapolis, we had a branch that sat literally next to the police department where these police officers worked every day. And there was chaos in Minneapolis. And our team, very strong group out of TCF, was right in the middle of this, I would say, this moment in history, in their streets and in their community. And so I thought it was important that we have a conversation. And we created that day and that week and that month a letter to our entire team, about 10,000 people. And I created a roundtable of a very diverse group of our colleagues across our TCF region. And I brought them all together and I said, let's just talk. I'd like to hear what's on your mind. I'd like to know what you think. What's going on in our institution? What's going on in the world? What's going on in the country? And it was one of the most impactful moments for the 50 of us that gathered. And we started a conversation that has not ended. That roundtable continues to exist. We're having dinner tonight, actually, in our offices at the Huntington Tower. And what came of that was a desire for us to be able to have a much broader dialogue we all, everybody in this room, almost every major company in the United States has a diversity and inclusion program, and they're doing a good job at it, and we're making inroads. But I really felt that we needed to know why we're doing this and where it came from, and what we could do as a community and as a company and as a country to make changes. So this roundtable started to travel. We went on a civil rights pilgrimage. We went to Washington to talk to our political leaders. And we started a dialogue that was much broader. And this year, after thinking about these trips, we decided, our team, that we wanted to expand this and turn this into something much broader. And so I sat down with a pencil and paper along with my team, and we jotted down the names of 23 impactful leaders in Detroit. That list could have been 100, 1,000. There are many in this room that should come with us next time. And I put together that list. I called my close and dear friend, Reverend Anthony, first, and I said, I want you to be my partner in this. And I started to call around to these 23 leaders, and as Hiram said, in 30 seconds, didn't matter what the date was, didn't matter what the itinerary was, I want to be part of this. And we took a trip. We went to Morehouse College and Spelman College in Atlanta. We got on a bus and we went to Montgomery and Birmingham. We met a civil rights veteran you saw in this video. And after 2.5 days of traveling through the history of the United States in one of the most despicable times in our era, seeing things that we couldn't even imagine. We all have history. We all went to school. We all learned about it. But when you go through a 2.5-day trip where you go deeply into the history, you really understand that this didn't start in the 60s. It started with a slave trade on plantations, and that we needed to understand why we're doing the things that we're doing. And we needed to make an impact, not just in our 23 organizations. We needed to make it citywide and statewide and countrywide, so that we in this era could really make the changes that we all know need to happen. So it's happening in our companies, it's happening in our communities. At the end of this 2.5 days, we sat around a table and we shared our experiences. And to a person, you're seeing some of my closest friends up here. At the end of those 2.5 days, there wasn't a single person, and you'll hear it, that wasn't moved to action to say we need to do more. And everybody came with their own perspective. Everybody had a different view. But by the end of the trip, we all understood that we've got a really big responsibility. And it came from this trip, but it comes from something much, much wider and bigger. And so Hiram said to me in a call after the trip, what's the next step? And Reverend Anthony on the end of our trip said, if this trip was worthwhile, it's going to mean that every single company of the 23 that we traveled with, but every company in the city needs to take a civil rights pilgrimage to understand how this happened, why it happened, and what we can do to make sure that it doesn't happen in the future, and that we need to protect each other's rights. When Dennis says they're going after me or they're going after you, they're going after all of us. And it's our responsibility to say we've had enough. We don't want to do this anymore. And we as companies, communities, individuals have that power to make a huge change in the world. And so the pilgrimage was a 2.5-day trip, but it really is a catalyst, I think, for an opportunity for us to have a much bigger dialogue and have a much bigger impact, and to really understand that this wasn't from the 1960s. This wasn't from May 25th, 2020, with protests around the world. This is not about a young man who goes to the door and gets shot by a white person because he's black. That's the world that we need to change, and we could do it. We have that opportunity. And so I'm grateful to my 23 friends, not all who are here today, who were willing to come on that trip. In a moment, they said yes. I'm grateful to our Huntington team who helped me drive this effort and make this a reality. And it is a very diverse group that came with. You could see just sitting up on this panel, but it was even more diverse. You could see the whole group. We really feel that we have an opportunity, and I'm grateful to Hiram, who said, we're going to start with Pancakes and Politics, and we're going to move this into a community effort. We're going to take this trip again. We're going to take it as companies. We're going to take it with you, and we're going to really understand the history that baked so much of what we need to change in our country. So thank you, Hiram.
Rev.
Thank you, Dennis. Good morning to everybody, and let me say Happy Father's Day to all the fathers and dads and granddads. Now that I'm here on time, let me acknowledge. I really want to thank Hiram and Dennis and the staff for doing this in your presence. But it has to be said that you reap what you sow. And Gary Torgo sowed these seeds, and now it has reaped this. And for that, we are grateful, because Gary has been the spark to ignite this kind of inclusive fire. The trip that we took, embedded in the South, but really it's reflective of the whole country and really our world. But in our nation now, we're at a very critical state. We all know that. And when you go south and when you go to those institutions, when you go to the 16th Street Baptist Church, when you see the place where the little girls were in Sunday school, September 15, 1963, and they were in Sunday school class, and they were killed as they were studying their Sunday school lesson, The Hate That Love Forgives. And they were killed, they were bombed. And when you think about that, when you think about the Bethel Baptist Church, where Fred Shuttlesworth was pastor, bombed 3 times, they called Birmingham Bombingham. Fannie Lou Hamer said of Mississippi that it's not the land of the free and the home of the brave, it's the land of the grave and the tree of the dead. And so when you put all that together, when you go to the Legacy Museum or the Slade Museum and you see a holograph of a little black girl and black boy wearing crocus sacks, and they're standing by themselves, and they appear to you as if they're standing in front of you talking. And the little girl says, "Has anybody seen my mother? Where is my mother?" And then she puts her arm around the little boy, which must have been her brother. "Can you tell us where our mother is? Mama, where are you?" And then she fades back, because no one knows where her mother is. Obviously, her mother has been taken from her. When you see that, and then when you recognize that the temple Bethel, which was in Birmingham, had 54 sticks of dynamite placed on its grounds to bomb that synagogue because they related or had a civil rights, social justice connection. And the bomb was planted, and had the bombs went off, it would have taken down that whole neighborhood. But the reason the bombs did not go off was because it rained and it diffused it. Some people call it a miracle. The woman that you saw in the video, Linda Blackman, if you go to Bloody Sunday, and you can Google it or go to YouTube, which happened in March of 1965 as John Lewis and the marchers were coming across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and they were beaten. John Lewis was almost killed. And they were met by Jim Clark and the dogs and the horses and the hoses. She was a little girl there. That's what she's talking about. She was 15 years of age. That was 58 years ago. And every time she talks about it, it is still traumatic, and it pours out of her. All of the people who were impacted by that, it still pours out of them. The children in the South took the place of their parents because they did not want their parents to be fired from the jobs that they had. So they did the marching. They did the arresting and been taken away. She was one of them. And so the trip basically was something to enable us to taste that and to feel that and to nurture that. And no one should be intimidated by that. Dr. King said, we in this era will be noted not for the noise of the bad people, but the silence of the good people. Rabbi Joshua Abraham Heschel, Dr. King's colleague, on many instances, said any time that you are silent, you are complicit. And it's not a question of good being better than evil, but silence is the real enemy. And so when you go on these trips, it should inspire you to come back and not be silent. Oh, I don't expect you to get on a pedestal and do the window Anthony. But do you, boo? Do you? Do what you do at your place. And finally, Dennis, let me just say this, and I'm so glad Arn Tellum, who was on the trip, he's not here today, but Jerry, you may remember when we had that discussion, he was talking about the business people. He said the business people can have a tremendous impact. It was the white business people in Montgomery, Alabama, that finally went to the white community and to the politicians and say, hold it, y'all gotta stop this. Segregation is bad for business. We can't continue to do this. They went to the business community, they went to the politicians and say, hold it, we gotta end this. They put pressure on them. Many of you all have political action committees. I know you do. I've seen some of the numbers. You contribute to a lot of people. Not telling you not to contribute, but be discerning. Use your impact. Let them know what you think. Certain things just cannot go. It's about policy. Having good programs is fine, but it's about policy. If you don't fix your policy, if you don't do DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and taking kids over here, that's nice. You should do that anyway. It's about policy. It's about inclusion. It's about who has access. It's about what are you building? What opportunities have you shaped? It's about policy. It's about policy.
Thanks, Rev. You know, it's interesting. Hiram, you said something in the video about things maybe haven't changed and perhaps they've gotten worse. I remember Terry Rattigan, back when y'all had a fleet during the good times, that, and Rev, I think you'll remember this, we flew with GM to the Image Awards. Mm-hmm. And it was around the time that now president, but before he was president, Obama was running. And you said something that was, I think, caused the whole plane, there's probably 12 of us or so on the plane, to pause. You said, be careful what you ask for, because if they give y'all a black president, they're gonna think they're done. And it's very interesting to have heard you say that, to hear Hiram say that nothing has changed or it's gotten worse. It causes me to pause. You know, to the panel, Angelique said, and I had to write this down, I had the opportunity to see this video last night, but she spoke to the exquisite design of racism. you know, I've never heard it said so eloquently but directly. You spoke about the exquisite design of racism present in Detroit every day, and then you mentioned that all of you and all of us have a platform to make a change. So I will ask the body, and for those of you who went to law school, there's the Socratic method when the professor just picks somebody. So Chad, I'm gonna pick you first. but the question is, and normally you don't get that heads up, but this question will be asked of everybody. Within your organizations, what are you doing differently as a result of this trip to dismantle this exquisite design of racism?
Thank you, Dennis. First, let me say that it was, as I'm sitting up here and listening to Gary speak and then listening to Dr. Wendell Anthony speak, I'm just praying to myself, don't pick me first, because I can't so forgive me, I'm not as eloquent of a speaker as either of these two gentlemen. So you're not going to be wowed. I will say that we immediately started having conversations, and that's where it has to start. You have to talk to your leadership teams, and you have to find out what's going on internally within your teams and share my experience with them, let them know what impacts that I've had. And then we have a retreat scheduled for 2 weeks, in about 2 weeks. And this is one of the topics that we're going to talk about. What are we doing as an organization to make a difference? One of the things that I've been in this position for 5 years. I've had the privilege of serving Wayne County Airport Authority as their CEO. And I've been saying this all my life, but I've been stressing it over the last 5 years, is that you have to be a change agent. You can't continue doing the same things and expect different results. One of my favorite quotes is by Henry Ford, and he says, change doesn't guarantee improvement, but you're guaranteed not to improve unless you change. So we are picking apart things within our organization every day. What are we doing well? What are we not doing well? How can we increase our diversity and inclusion? And we are finding ways, and we've built a strong team. And I look at the numbers, and I won't get into our data, but our numbers are just increasing every single quarter, every single year, in a way that is reflective of an organization that understands diversity and inclusion. And we still have a long way to go, but we certainly are on the right path.
Ken, you're in this fight every day, man. So this is work you've been doing prior to the trip, but having gone on this trip, how has it affected what you're doing going forward?
I think for me, I was already intentional about how we operated as a company, as an organization, but I think this made me a little more laser focused on our hiring processes and what we were asking of our employees, what we were asking of the members of our community and our ecosystem and justice reform, just being extremely intentional about how we tell our stories and what we ask in return when we go out into the community. So I think for me, it definitely raised my scale of awareness to some of the things that I overlooked in my work on a regular basis.
Jerry?
I'll just take 1 minute to explain the experience from my perspective when I went on this trip. We got, like Reverend Anthony said, a small taste of one of the most despicable times in our history, I would say, as Gary said. And I've been on 2 of these types of trips, but this one here really made me think about, and I know Reverend Anthony says this all the time, that ignorance and lack of understanding created that situation. That somehow the people that were brought into the slave trade and how they were treated, and then the continued treatment of African Americans, that it was born out of ignorance and lack of understanding, and also created evil, right? And it was just amazing to me that people could do this to one another. That's what I walked away with. That was a really touching moment, I think, and really moved me to say, You know, the part that's going to be different is I want my family to experience this. I want my leaders to experience this, and so that we don't repeat it again. And so that we don't forget, you know, and Gary took me on another trip like this. I mean, he's has a way of moving you and on these trips. We went to Israel where we saw the same thing, and, you know, the title of this is, you know, religion, culture, and race. And what I saw there was that most of the people in this region were born of the same religion, the fountain of the same religion. You know, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism all came from the same place. Like, when I say the same place, like the same, like, quarter-mile square area, okay? And then I think about what's come out of that, all the violence that came out of religion. So that was that trip, and you say, why is that? We all came from the same place, but yet we can't seem to find a way to make it work, and it's born again out of ignorance, not understanding each other. Because all of those religions are about peace and love, right? And same with this trip on race was the same way. Like, how could this happen when we really all care about the same thing and want the same things in life? So my advice to all of you, and this is what I've done, is go there, go and visit it, go and experience it, because it will change your life. And even if you shift 1 degree, if all of us shifted 1 degree, we'd make a huge difference in the world by doing something different. And like Dr. Reverend Anthony said, you know, you can't be, not everybody can be a hero, but you can shift a little bit. That's right. You can make a fundamental difference in this world. And if you experience it, it'll encourage you to do what you need to do. So that'd be my advice and thoughts from it. And we're doing that internally. I want to take my leadership team and my family on that trip so that they can more deeply understand and not forget.
Reverend Jackson.
Yes. Well, for me, coming from a denomination, I am AME, African Methodist Episcopal, and so the denomination that I come from, we came out of civil rights because we were not allowed to pray at a Methodist church, and so our leader came out of that church and founded the AME church. So for me, going there and going on that pilgrimage, but it made it even more personal. And it made me think about what I am doing and what I can do more of. So coming from that, I'm a firm believer that action speaks louder than words, and that it has to be more than what we say. And as a pastor, it has to be more than what we do on a Sunday morning. That it has to involve not only our congregation, not only our denomination, but it has to involve our community, it has to involve our city and our state. That trip for me was so emotional, and just watching and listening made me feel the same type of emotion that I felt while there. When we were traveling from Montgomery to Birmingham, we were on a bus, and we were, as you see, we were very diverse, and we were singing songs, and we were some spirituals and what have you. And there was construction on the road as we were traveling, and we had to stop and slow down. And that moment, I felt like on the bus of like the freedom fighters, because I got scared, knowing that we were okay. It was just construction. But it took me back to what they might have felt as they were traveling and as they were going to fight for justice, and how diverse they were. And they actually, a lot of them, were harmed and killed. And so it really put me in that space and made me realize that there is so much more that we have to do. And it truly does start with us, one, listening to one another, two, loving one another, because that's what all of our religions are about, that the maker, God, is love. And so if we follow that we'd be so much better. if we looked at each other as how we're created, not our differences, but how we are so much alike, because we all got the same blood. We may have different colors of skin, but we're all created to love and to be loved. And if we could get past all the other stuff. And so that's what I'm preaching about. That's what I'm working on. And just thinking about like our denomination, Mother Emanuel, where Dylan Ruth came in while they were just having Bible study, and how we welcome them in. But what I constantly remember is that the family members came back and said, I forgive and I still love, because so that's a message that I feel and that I share, and that I pray that we all can get to that space where we could just overlook our differences and just love and care about one another. So that's what I took from.
Jeff, you run a business that represents and advocates on behalf of the state's leading CEOs and businesses. And so what did this trip mean to you, and then how do you relay that back to your leadership and your members?
Yeah, it's interesting. We went to the Legacy Museum that talks about from slavery to mass incarceration. That was probably one of the more powerful places that I think we visited. And there's a wall in there that has a jar of dirt from multiple different sites around the country where lynchings happened. And they collected dirt from the place where the lynching took place. And you felt like you were attending funerals for every one of those individuals in that place. It was like almost, it was very solemn, and it was powerful and moving. And then to realize that some of these lynchings took place not too long ago, right? Within many of our lifetimes here in this room still. It really strikes you. And I think it goes back to something Angelique said too about, and Dennis, you mentioned too, about sometimes we think the civil rights movement was the past, right? That what we did, we accomplished certain things. We got a black president. We passed major legislation. But it's today. It's in everything that we're trying to do to drive that widely shared prosperity that's a part of our mission. And let me just give you an example of that. When I came back to Detroit in 2015 from Washington, D.C. to run workforce development in the city here, I was working with business leaders. I was working with nonprofits. And I was doing one of the first things we set up was an in-prison training program to try to help people who were leaving prison get into jobs and have skills when they came back, that they could have a family-sustaining wage, that they could be a productive part of society and not go back into that system. And what we found in our first couple graduating classes is 70% of people still weren't getting jobs, even though we were training them in exactly the skills and techniques that the employers said they were looking for. And as we kept digging, we saw that most of them didn't have a driver's license. We said, why was that? Gosh, why are people who are coming out of prison, we know who they are supposedly, right? We've had them in state custody for this long, but we can't get them an ID and a driver's license. And as we dug, we saw that a few years, maybe a decade before we started this work, the state had put in place something called driver's responsibility fees, right? How many people know about that? Yeah. And as I started talking to nonprofit organizations who were doing training, I said, why are your trainings so expensive? They said, well, we have to pay off these driver responsibility fees. This was a fee that was just put on top of a traffic ticket, not because someone was unsafe, right, but because the state was looking to collect a few more dollars to close a budget gap. And guess what? Who did that impact the most? It impacted the poor. It impacted minority communities. When we started really digging into it, because no one knew the extent of how bad it was, I had to have reporters help me with this, but it was 350,000 Michiganders that had an outstanding fee, and if you had an outstanding fee, you got your driver's license suspended. Not because you were a threat on the road, but because you couldn't pay a debt. And guess what, when we looked into what that was for Detroit? It was 76,000 Detroiters who had their driver's license suspended, 20% of our adult population. That's racism. That is systematic racism. And making sure we connect that to what we're trying to build in policy. Business leaders were outraged when I told them this. Legislators were outraged when I told them this. But when I went to the state initially, they said, well, it's $100 million that we're collecting through this every year. How are we going to replace it? So it took us a year and a half to build a case to say, this is wrong. Not just morally wrong, but it's wrong because you're holding people back. And wouldn't you rather get revenues by having them employed and becoming a productive part of society? And we got $650 million wiped off the books of debt, and we eliminated that completely. That's one example, and it didn't get everybody back their driver's license because there's a whole bunch of other systemic issues that we have to deal with. And so as I look at that, and as I look at the legacy, truly that word of legacy, I try to talk to my staff and my board of 106 business leaders and the coalitions that we build to say, this fight is not over, and that what we do to build widely shared prosperity and a healthy economy is very much about civil rights and equity, and we shouldn't shy away from that.
Thank you, Joe. Father Tim, the exquisite design of racism unfortunately lends itself to a lot of work that you do. And I understand from Hiram that you're embarking on a very impactful and ambitious next step in your organization. Having gone on this trip, how will that impact how you tackle this next stage of your work?
Yeah, we are in the process of building a campus to help people transition from homelessness, chronic homelessness, to housed. And this $37 million project that will be completed hopefully in the second quarter of '24. But the understanding is when we started to ask the hard questions, working with those who are homeless, is why are blacks so disproportionately represented among the homeless population? You had to start asking those questions, and then you start to understand that trauma is at the root of so much of homelessness. It is trauma-informed care is the approach that we are taking. The trip, and I hope Aaron, I hope you don't mind me telling this story, but the young man that made this video, we were going through the Legacy Museum, and an hour into this, I can't breathe because I'm so overwhelmed by the reality of what this nation has done to so many people. And at one point, I was walking near Aaron, and he had dropped his camera, and he was just walking, and I knew I was struggling with this. I wanted to know what it was like for a young African-American male. So I asked him, like, how are you doing? And he's like, it's hard to put into words. He said, I feel grateful to my ancestors. I feel rage. He said, I think about this all as something in the past, but I look around these walls and I see people that look just like my family. Mm-hmm. And he started to sob at this guttural level of pain that he was experiencing. And I understood generational trauma in a different way because of this experience. And I knew that I had to take that back and allow that to inform how we treat the folks that are experiencing homelessness. I'll say one other thing. I also have a responsibility as a Jesuit priest, as a Catholic, to go back to those institutions that I am a part of and say there are institutional racism deeply embedded in the church. And we have got to address those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Angelique, we opened this line of questioning with your quote, and I also opened my statements talking about kids. Yeah. And your whole body of work is around helping, saving, educating Detroit-specific kids, which we all know the majority of which are African American. How did this trip inspire your work every day?
So much of the civil rights movement was centered on desegregating schools. And it wasn't because Black communities didn't have great schools. It wasn't because Black communities wanted to be in closer proximity to white communities where there'd been so much hatred and cruelty in the past. It was because in our communities we understood that we need access to resources. We need fantastic facilities. We deserve the latest technology. We deserve sports and arts because we have so much to offer. And the violence that was perpetrated against parents and young people as they tried to walk into the schools was visceral. Detroit schools are segregated schools. There is not the resources that are needed. They are underfunded. They are emaciated operationally. And the Legacy Museum was definitely a testament to the bravery and beauty of our ancestors in the face of tremendous cruelty. But it was really a study of apathy and complicity. And that's where I felt we need to look in the mirror. So it isn't the other. Although I go to the museum and I identify with my ancestors, the harder work is to identify with the crowd around those being lynched and to ask ourselves, how are we members of that crowd? Where is our voice with Detroit schools? Where are each of us standing up and saying, we need more money? Equal funding isn't enough. We need equitable funding for our schools. Where are each of us standing up and saying, we have responsibility to bring young people into our world, to volunteer, to turn Detroit into a campus of learning? So a lot of the policy piece, I left with that understanding. I also left with an understanding that it's easy to say these words, but it's harder to do this work. So Skillman has done a racial equity audit. We looked at every penny, where we're spending it the last 3 years by race. It wasn't hard to do. And then we released it publicly so that we can be held accountable to Detroit's young people. So I encourage each of us, each of our institutions, it isn't just words, it's receipts.
Gary, I think you wanted to follow up on that.
So first I want to say that I look out at the audience, I have so many friends here, and if you'd like to raise your hand, you'd like to go on this trip, let me know. Put your hand up if you want to come. All right, great, we'll get you. Second is, I want to say we took 23 really important leaders. They gave 3 days of their lives. They all got big things to do in the world, and they gave 3 days to really understand this. The third thing I want to say is that we were all in a room with this civil rights veteran who you saw, Linda, on the screen. And there was not a dry eye in the place when she said, I want to tell you about 15 minutes. She said, my father throughout my life used to say 15 minutes, 15 minutes. And I never knew what he was talking about. And finally I pinned him down and I said, Dad, what are you talking about? And he said, I'm going to tell you. He said, your mom died young. She died in a hospital here in Alabama. And the difference in her life was 15 minutes because in those days she needed a blood transfusion and you could not give a black woman white blood. And we had to bring that blood from Ohio and the blood came 15 minutes late and she died on the table. And when we heard that, we said, everybody needs to hear this. Ken, who is sitting behind me, is an exoneree. He served 16 years in a Michigan prison for a crime he didn't commit. And as he was walking through this museum, I'm standing next to him, and he said, it's just amazing. He said, what they did on the plantation, they chained everybody together and they walked them in a line. He said, that's what they do in the Michigan prisons today. He said, on the plantations, when it was time for breakfast, they would ring a bell. They do the same thing in the Michigan prisons today. Right. So I want to say first to my team, Katerina Flatto, who put the itinerary together and did a tremendous job. And And our bank team, when the bank said, I said, we're doing this, and the bank said, great, whatever it costs, we're going to do this because we're going to make an impact. And when I listen to what everybody is saying up here, and there are more who could be up here, I am so grateful to you, Hiram and Dennis, for giving us a chance to open this dialogue and to really have a chance to be with each other in a way that we could do this together. We're not different. You all feel the same way we do, and we need to do this together as a community in a great city of Detroit. So thank you so much.
Of course.
I just wanted to say that what we wanted to do was use the trip to create a broader dialogue, and I can't say that enough. There are a lot of business leaders here. This is the kind of platform that we wanted when we created Pancakes and Politics 18 years ago. A lot of socioeconomic levels here, a lot of race, diversity, religion. And so let's turn the corner now a little bit and talk about what's next. And just to start the discussion, for me, what's next was yesterday I joined Maha Frage, who is the CEO of Access. My son and I joined her for a full day. We toured the Access facilities, the mental health facilities, the medical facilities, their workforce development facilities, and the Arab American Museum. I did not know that there was an Arab American Museum in Dearborn. I'm embarrassed to say that. I did not. I had never been there. Because of the trip, it allowed me to connect with her and get a better understanding about the history of Arab Americans in not only the Detroit area, but the United States. And I'm going to be better because of that, and we've already, the Michigan Chronicle and Access and some significant members of the Arab American community are already talking about how we can work together to help each other. So I want to kind of shift gears a little bit. Some great examples of lessons learned from the trip. Jerry and I are friends, we talk all the time, and I know that he has used his platform and his position to make sure that students in DPS have an opportunity to get some of the better paying jobs at DTE. He explained to me, I hope you don't mind me telling you, he explained to me how, it's kind of a network of employees that when they retire, they grab their nephew or they grab their neighbor, and they're able to become tree trimmers or work on the poles, and those are high-paying jobs. And so he had worked with his team to shift that and say, let's expand the opportunity. And now they're training black boys and girls in DPS so that they can have those opportunities. That's policy change. That's being courageous. Jeff Donofrio, if you guys were at Pancakes and Politics last year, we found out that he now uses poverty as an indicator on whether Michigan can become a top 10 state. That's huge. That is huge. That's huge. We can't become a top 10 state if we have, 50% childhood poverty in our largest cities. That's policy, right? So, and Father Tim on the way back on our challenging plane ride, he connected the dots for me between, the civil rights movement, lack of economic opportunity, homelessness today. I had never been able to, I know about that, obviously, the homelessness issues throughout America, but he helped me connect the dots, and now I'm smarter because of that. So I just throw that out there because I know Dennis is going to the audience, but what can we do? What can we do in this room to effectuate change together with this new knowledge that we have obviously acquired?
There are blue cards on your table, and my colleague Andre Ash is over here and will take questions or comments from the audience. Recognizing it's 7 after 9, we hope that you all can keep it brief. And Hester is going to show us how to keep it brief.
Jeff Donofrio talked earlier about the former or previous driver responsibility fees and how he named it as being a systematic racism that existed, and how interesting is it that we have Hester Wheeler, who is ushering in a new era at the Secretary of State as Senior Advisor, with our first question.
Yes, sir. Thank you. White Martin Luther Kings. We need more of them. Who are they? How do you measure progress if you don't count? Which corporations, which organizations have it right? So my name is Hester Wheeler. Donofrio, I'm happy to be a part of that solution. Today, for the very first time in Michigan history, everybody that leaves a Michigan prison has a driver's license or a state ID, and that's based on a conversation we had. Everybody that leaves a Michigan prison with a tree trimming license will have a commercial driver's license. Norcia, that's based on a conversation we had. So you don't have power if you don't use it. Who are the white Martin Luther Kings? I think there's a few of them in here. Black folk ought not be the only folk expected to speak to race and equity. So who are they?
Andre, you got a question over here in the center of the room. And while you make your way there, Hiram, I will ask you, since you have forced yourself upon me this morning on the stage. we have asked everybody up here what they will do differently in their organization as a result of the trip. But you run a very impactful, very important African-American owned and influenced media company that's headquartered here, but again has national presence, employees all over the country. How have you changed and will you change as a result of you going on this trip?
Real quick, I'll tie it to the most impactful part of the trip for me. We went to Morehouse College, met with the president of Morehouse, and he had a young man with him, highlighting the significance of Morehouse College. And it just so happened to be a young man from Detroit. And the year before, we do the SWAG Awards, Michigan Chronicle and Huntington Bank. We interviewed this kid, and he wanted to go to Morehouse College, but couldn't afford it. And he sat down, Gary and I interviewed these kids, and when he walked in the room and started talking, Gary whispered to me, this kid could be president one day. That's honest truth. But he couldn't go to Morehouse College. The next day, Gary had a conversation with the president of Morehouse College. He's gonna hate me for telling this story. He had a conversation with the president of Morehouse College and made a way for that kid to go to Morehouse. Right? But the significance of watching this young brother articulate in an amazing way what the school means to him and what he plans to do with it. And I was just saying to myself, I gotta be more involved in these young black men's lives, because they have the desire, the passion, the skill set. They just need the vision. They just need the vision and
opportunity.
Access.
Right. Opportunity.
And opportunity.
That's it.
There's no lack of skill, there's a lack of opportunity.
That's right.
Andre.
All right, joined by our next question.
You got about 10 more minutes.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hurd, Board President of the Detroit Regional LGBT Chamber of Commerce and the Manager of Inclusion Engagement Programs at Gannett, or USA Today Network. My question is two parts. First, out of the people that were on the trip, who was missing in the room? Did you ask yourself that question? Was there cisgender, was it all cisgender people? Was it different people of different religions? Who was missing? And then the second question is, how do we create a systemic response to eradicate racism in the United States and around the world?
Thanks so much.
I don't think anybody was missing. the fact that we had such a diverse group kind of speaks for itself, to the degree that, and this is not the last trip, this is a continuation of visitation relative to all of the things that we've been talking about. And as it relates to systemic racism, that's an issue that has to be, I think King talked about, I can't legislate you to love me, but I can legislate you to stop killing me. I can create some policies and programs that eliminate that ability and make it illegal. I think systematically we have to, the government has to be involved in all of that. Our political leadership has to be. Do you know that what we've just been discussing, the Legacy Museum would be illegal in Florida right now? Do you know the places that we went would be illegal to put in the state of Florida right now? Some of the books that we read, you cannot read in Florida and other states. And people want to bring that show on the road to Michigan. And so that's where we come in, because we know better than that. And so then as you ask, what are we going to do? Let me tell you what I'm going to do. For me, I'm going to organize a June Jubilee. And we're going to have from the 22nd through the 25th, right here in the city of Detroit. We're going to be bringing Kimberly Crenshaw on critical race theory, what it is, what it ain't, because people are using that as a ruse to keep from dealing with the truth. We're going to be bringing Ayanna Gregory here, the daughter of Dick Gregory, the civil rights icon, to talk about the significance of civil rights and what we all need to be doing. We're going to be bringing Mike Dyson, scholar, writer, thinker, in here to talk about and to bring it all together, chaos or community. Where do we go from here? All that's going to be free, open at the Wayne County Community College District. Ken Coleman and Jamon Jordan going to be dealing with civil rights, labor, and business and what that means. And then on Friday, Rochelle Riley and us, we're going to unveil the statue of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. right down in Hart Plaza on Friday, June the 23rd, for all to see, because this is one of the first places that he gave his I Have a Dream speech on the way to Washington, D.C. Before you go to D.C., you got to come through the big D. That's Detroit. And so we're going to do that. We're going to do that on the 23rd. On Friday, on Saturday, the 24th, we're going to have the March Towards Freedom. Everybody is invited. Black, white, brown, red, yellow. It's going to be mellow in the city of Detroit. Rural, urban, suburban. Come and show your unity. That's Saturday, June the 24th, starting at 10 o'clock at the corner of Woodward Avenue and Martin Luther King Boulevard. Then on Sunday, we're going to have the biggest dinner for freedom that we have in the country. You're all invited to come to that, featuring Raphael Warnock, the first African-American senator from the state of Georgia. And to top it off, we're going to honor my brother back here with a Great Expectation Award for the work he's been doing. We're going to honor the last living lieutenant of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Ambassador Andrew Young, with our James Weldon Johnson Lifetime Achievement Award. So that's what I'm going to do, Dennis, in terms of trying to make myself available for everybody in the community.
Hey, Dennis, can I add to Reverend Anthony's comments? Who is missing? You were missing. Other people in this room were missing. It was not about us. That's why we're here, to say this isn't a complete open and shut opportunity. We need your voice. We need so many of the heroes and warriors in this room. We need so many of the people who have never been to the DAC, who don't even know it exists. So many were missing.
Thank you. We're gonna end the morning out of respect of everyone's time in about 7 minutes. So, Dwan, brevity.
Good morning. So I'm Dwan Dandridge, CEO of Black Leads Detroit. I guess my comment/question is, I think I heard Gary kind of start off talking about the protests that followed George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the others of 2020. And we had some very brave protesters here in Detroit that applied the pressure that I think we ended up seeing some of the pledges take place. As the question was who was missing, I wonder if we thought about making sure that they were present here, right? I think that they had to go through a struggle and dealt with some of that racism that still is alive and present in Detroit that I don't have to experience as a 49-year-old black man with a bicycle rack on the back of my car. But, you know, my son and our sons, as we talked about Dennis, may have a different experience with the same police that I have. I'm friends with many of them. So I guess what are we doing to make sure that their voice is here and present, because they were the folks that I think you all went to visit, right? There are our present day folks that dealt with some of those things.
Does anybody want to quickly address it, the comment?
I'll quickly address it. Thank you, Juan. There are a lot of young people who have a vision for the future. 43% of residents in Detroit are under 30. And Gen Z, part of this generation, they see things differently. They are very intersectional in their identities, in their analysis of issues, and in their proposal for solutions. The civil rights leaders were young. They were young. And so for us to support the young generation and to bring them into these spaces and to, not to educate them, but to listen to them, that's a huge opportunity that we have.
And I'm glad you asked that, because part of the June Jubilee is going to be including all of that.
There you go.
Because at Marygrove, at Wayne County Community College District, there's going to be a session dealing with brothers and sisters who have been on the streets, who've been incarcerated, who are trying to reconstitute themselves and to be a part of this. Darrell Woods will be a part of that, I'm sure. Negus Boo and Teferi Brand and some other folk who've been out there on the streets will be a part of all of that. So, and you are certainly welcome to come to be part of it as well. That's Thursday from 9 to 4, free open to the public, WC3D Northwest Campus.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I want to address that question. I think the answer to that starts in this room. When we think about young people, to be clear, I'm on the streets every day. I'm out here in the community every day. Part of my responsibility as a man, part of my responsibility as my job. Being on the streets and seeing what's happening, she makes a very important point. We're not listening, right? Everybody in this room, how many of you are actually out there talking to the youth? How many of you are out there actually listening, right? But what are we doing to address their concerns? Therein lies the problem, because we're not addressing the concerns of what they're asking us about. What they're asking us for is access. They're asking us for a seat at the table.
That's right.
They're asking us to communicate on a level that's effective to youth. We can't talk above their heads and expect them to understand us. We can't talk business communication language and expect them to understand us. Therein lies the problem, communication. You want to address the issue? Listen, talk, give them an opportunity. That's what's missing, opportunity and access.
Thank you. We have a couple minutes left. I'm going to invite you, Gary, as you convene this trip to close out this session. Let me just say that as I bring it back to graduation last night, Nia Batts was the African-American woman, very impressive, who is also a graduate of this school, closed by telling the graduates a quote from Maya Angelou. And she said, "We are the we that we all have been waiting for."
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And so, to me, that was very impactful last night, and even more so this morning, as I hear how these leaders have gone on this trip and are going to change how they conduct themselves personally and in their business. I would ask you all, having heard the story this morning, to think about how you're going to do the same. Gary?
I just want to thank all of you for giving your morning to this. I want to thank the whole group that came with us and those that are not here. I want to thank Hiram I want to thank Dennis. I want to thank the Michigan Chronicle for being such a great partner in so many of the works that we're involved in. I want to thank all of you. So many of you are doing great things. It should not go unnoticed. The companies that I'm looking at their tables, you're all doing really wonderful things. The scholarship programs, the internships that you're giving in your companies, the work that you are doing. It shouldn't go unnoticed even though you're not on the stage. We know that you're doing great things. I think what we learned, and I think what Ken said is, we got a lot more to do, and we could do it together in a way that we could really change the community, our city. We could do what the Reverend tells us to do, which we all do, and I'm grateful to all of you for your efforts. Let's double them, and let's continue to work together for very important causes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day.
The biggest takeaway for me today was when he said 15 minutes. Just thinking about the impact of that and how it related to me personally. My grandmother also died as a result of not being able to receive a blood transfusion as a black woman. She was 25 years old. And I've never told that story publicly, but hearing him say that, or hearing, that being talked about, the impact of those 15 minutes was very, very personal for me. And it just reminded me that our stories matter.
What was interesting is that a lot of times being an African American and understanding our history, growing up with our history, hearing about it over and over and over again, you forget that other people may not have access to that information like we do. And the fact that some of those people were getting some of that information on this trip they took for the first time, that they didn't understand, and how that enlightened them and opened their eyes, I thought was fantastic. That was an amazing thing.
We've been teaching the American myth for 400 years. So the first thing we have to do is teach real American history to all Americans. This effort to not teach that history is not because, we don't want kids to feel guilty or, it's just not necessary. It has been a deliberate attempt to change what happened in America. So what we have to do is face what happened in America and make sure every child knows it, because those children grow up to be politicians and CEOs and other people who live their lives and do their business based on what they know. And we are an ignorant America, but ignorant no more, because the fight to make sure that the truth is told is not going to stop.